No, honestly, I'm thrilled to be here, and I love your program.
Thank you so much. And we are a fan of yours as well. So, Adam's been doing such great work with Bad to the Dad podcast and making a space for men to go be men and talk about stuff, right? There's so many things for women, but when do guys really get to connect and talk about all those important things that they need to be talking about? So Adam's created a space for that. And that's awesome because our husbands need to go and have that outlet so that we can have better relationships with them, right?
I would agree 100%. And I think, what we have discovered just through an evolution in the podcast is, yeah, we're getting great stories about what dads do with their kids and what their partnership looks like with their spouses, wives, husbands, whatever the case may be. But we're also learning that people have interesting professions or hobbies or just different outlooks on life. And that was a happy accident that came about producing the show for now 4 seasons.
Yeah, congratulations. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Adam is on the show for a few reasons, right? We want to bring a dad in because we need that male perspective once in a while, right? We talk in through the pink microphone, and sometimes we need to hear some women's issues through the blue microphone, right? So we want to be able to bring that diversity to the show. But the other reason that Adam is with us is because Adam actually works in human resources, is kind of like boots on the ground during this COVID thing, working with people, helping them through this time from like a work perspective. And that's what this show is all about, right? Work, school, COVID. So Adam's going to help us kind of dive into the realm of what we can be doing in our personal life and pursuing new interests, and how that's eventually going to possibly help us with career endeavors down the road, right? Did I get that right?
Sounds good to me. I'm here to talk about whatever you like, but I think that's a great agenda.
That's what we talked about offline, right, Adam?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's right. I wasn't sure if we're peeling back the curtain and letting everyone see the wizard, but yeah.
Well, the last several weeks, because I think this is our 6th week doing this series, right, Jess?
Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're in week 6. So we've heard from all of these women, obviously, these career professional women, about how they're trying to manage their work situation and manage their children at the same time. And a lot of them have mentioned their husbands' involvements, but we haven't really been able to hand that mic over to hear what they have had to say about it. And we don't want to overlook the fact that the men are the partners or the boyfriends or the husbands or the uncles in our lives are very active right now as well in families and assisting with homeschooling, and also being afforded this opportunity maybe to work from home where they hadn't been before, and have this immense amount of space and time to figure out what they're about and what they really want to pursue. So I think that this is going to help everybody at home, which is great.
Yeah. I think it's taking that whole lean in concept, which has been around for probably the better part of almost 2 decades, and really jacking it up to a whole other level. I think if anything, if you'll pardon the cliche, it truly has leveled the playing field amongst the spouses, with both of them being home. So especially if you're in a multi-kid family, on any given day, a parent gets a kid. I know in Jessica's house, maybe a parent gets 2 kids.
Right.
And you have to kind of see what's the flavor of the day and where is which parent most needed, best needed. I can tell you in my house, I'm the foreign language, English, social studies person, and my wife is the STEM. She's the science and math. And then there are, some subjects where we sort of live in the middle of the Venn diagram, but it's been a really good experience to see that balanced partnership kind of flourish, depending on who's got the right skill set at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And how has it been for you, Adam, being home? Because you're used to being out of the house. Because when we talked offline, you were saying, like guys are home and they're starting to see things during the day, like, behind the scenes what mom and the kids do all day, and kind of like getting in the mix there. So.
Yeah, it's a great question. I did not work from home that much for the better part of my career, because I was working primarily with companies with an international presence or a presence with different spots around the country, and traveling to those sites was pretty common. So it was not unusual for me to be on the road every 6 weeks.
Mm.
And actually, it was something that I look forward to, not just because you're accumulating miles that hopefully you can use for a pleasure trip somewhere down the line. But for me, it was okay. I've been home enough. I'm getting a little crispy. Now let's see what's going on in the South. Now let's see what's going on in India or Europe, which is where one of the companies took me. The West Coast. It was a great way to form relationships with people of different cultures. It gave me a great sense to see what was the rhythm of business like, and how can I help, and how can I take my skill set and help people solve problems. And there was a great energy in being on the road. There was a great energy in being in the office. I really felt like I did my best work when I was walking the floor, knocking on office doors, seeing how people were doing. And maybe that's just the nature of human resources, but it's also probably the way I'm hard coded as well. So ironically, when all this went down, I had just flown back from a business trip from Cleveland. And it was a weird trip because I was doing focus groups and training. And every hour on the hour, the CEO of that particular business knocked on the door and said, "This just in, this hospital is shutting out people. We can't go in there and develop business. This school is closed. That college is closed." So, in a very short period of time away from home, I was getting the sense that life was going to change very, very quickly.
Mm.
And I came home on that Friday. I remember this indelibly, March 13th, and called my boss on Sunday, which was the 15th, and said, I, I may have been exposed to somebody who has had COVID. I was in the same room, but not very close to that, near them. And she said, "Okay, why don't you stay home and don't come back until further notice?" I'm still waiting for my further notice. And have been really in this position, right, staring at this screen
Mm.
ever since the middle of March. And I think a lot of your listeners have probably gone through a similar scenario. So
Mm.
haven't worked from home a ton, but it has been a great learning experience to see how my wife works from home. She's definitely more organized, more detail oriented, more disciplined. I love a good distraction, so when I see that ping come up on Facebook Instant Messenger, that's like, oh joy, here we go with something else to do. But if you have a battle plan and you have enough to do, and certainly we have enough to do now, you get used to it and you can actually get good at it.
Now I know I'm going to send you more messages during the day
Oh,
because you're going
please
to go
do.
like
Yeah.
this. That's okay. All right, cool. So it's been an adjustment for you.
It's certainly been a cultural adjustment for me, but it happened quick for everybody except for my wife, who was working from home anyway. So she was sort of the master of domain, and just by watching her, you got a sense of how to do it right. So probably a week after I was homebound, after my Cleveland trip, the kids were then homebound because all learning went online, and it didn't go online the way we're experiencing it now,
Yeah.
where Zooms are simulating the classroom. It was
Right.
almost like the kids were studying at the University of Phoenix, where they were downloading assignments, doing them, uploading assignments, and probably by 10:30 they were done.
Right.
So there you had to make sure that all the Wi-Fi was clicking on all cylinders.
Right.
The downloads and uploads were working well. You were still able to communicate with the teachers to make sure that you were doing your assignments and doing them properly. You had
Mm.
to check afternoon to make sure that your teacher didn't sneak in another assignment and you didn't miss anything because the assignments were due at midnight. So that was an extra assignment for us. And
Right.
then of course you had to find other ways to keep the kids busy after 12 noon besides lunch and besides the Xbox. So
I would
having
think
a preteen and a teen in the house, that's always a challenge because they don't want to get assignments from their parents. They want to get them from their friends and their teachers. Well, maybe they don't want to get them from their teachers, but they'll do them if they get them from their teachers. So
of
yeah,
course.
it's like spinning plates, right? You have to make sure that everyone in your home is taken care of, but you also have to make sure that your own responsibilities aren't slipping.
I'm loving that you're talking about that audibly right now, because there's so many articles, resources, so many interviews that we've done with women concerning this mental load that women carry, particularly now that we're working from home. That we always have running lists, that we have job responsibilities, but we're generally the ones who also have to carry the litany of everyone's schedules and doctor's appointments and classes. And that's the perception, right? That women or wives are the ones who have that. But what you just shared, right? You expressed that that's also something that you are carrying as well, that you are checking in with your kids and their assignments and their schooling is also part of your mental load. What else is part of men's and dads' mental loads that we need to know about?
Hmm. And first of all, I think you're right about, just the burden of taking care of pretty much everything being on the mom. It's not to say that dads are absent or they're not willing. In fact, on Bad to the Dad, we constantly joke, but not really, that the number one hardest job in the world is mom. Number two is people who work in a coal mine. Number three is the person who paints the Verrazano Bridge. Then you get to first responders and nurses and the military. And if we're lucky, dad is somewhere in the 500s, and even that's being fairly generous. So, I think because of those traditional roles, you know, dads, I think, have been the people who teach the how to build. Now they're teaching the how to cook. Uh, I think they've always helped with the homework that they want to help out with. But I also think that there is an element of dad as golfer, poker player, little league coach, doing the things that guys traditionally do. And I think that dads and certainly mom should still find a way to continue to do that, because it is for the betterment of your mental health. And I also think it is good for kids to see variety in your life. I think it's good to see parents work hard, because they see their parents an arm's length away showing off a good work ethic, then hopefully that translates to them as well. But I think having that variety and making sure that there's time in the day to do things that you're really passionate about, that's critically important. One piece of advice I've been giving to people who have been homebound at work, where the scenery never changes, right?
Yeah.
You wake up, maybe you shower, maybe you get dressed, maybe you work out, but then you get dressed, you get your kids dressed, you're having breakfast, you're getting them set up on the Zoom for school, unless they're self-sufficient. You're sitting down, you're at your computer, you're humming along with your work, your Zoom calls, your conference calls, whatever projects you have. Then maybe it's noon, 1 o'clock. Oh, it's already lunchtime. Didn't look at the clock, didn't realize it. Now I'm having lunch. Okay, 15 minutes. Running upstairs, running downstairs, wherever the office is, you're gobbling it up. Then you're doing another 5, 6 hours of work. Oh my goodness, it's 6:30, 7 o'clock. And you're always on the treadmill. Finally, you sit down for dinner. And I remember this probably 3 weeks into our quarantine. I remember sitting and eating, and I was looking my wife in the eye, and she was looking at me in the eye, and it wasn't like a romantic look. It was, this is getting old. This is getting old. So we knew that a deviation was going to be important. So look, I'm lucky. I have the podcast. I've had the podcast before pre-COVID. So, but that's also helped me develop a new skill set: producing the show, hunting for good guests. My partner, Randy Nathan, he does a lot of the technical aspects of the show. So he's learned GarageBand through and through. We probably know more than we've ever wanted to about podcast statistics through the Blueberry service, but also the different streaming platforms. And that's good. That nourishes us, that enriches us. And as a result, we found that other people who want to do podcasts have contacted us to say, hey, how do you find all these guests? How do you convince them to be on your show, even though you're essentially a street level performer? What are the best technology platforms that you're using? How do I get on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts? When do I start charging for advertising? So I'm kind of going on and on here, but as a result of pursuing kind of a newfound passion, it's almost created a separate cottage industry for us, and energizes us, because there's something different out there. And I recommend that, husband, wife, whoever you might be, try to find that thing, that new skill set that helps you deviate from the everyday, because it does two great things, in my opinion. Number one, it creates a new skill set, which again is great for mental health, and it challenges you. I think every year people should try to find something new that challenges them or build off on a new challenge of something you've already done, right? So build that new skill set.
Mm.
The second thing, the second value that finding that new pursuit does for you is it creates community. So I mentioned all those people that were reaching out to us. We reach out to people for advice as well.
Right.
And next thing you know, you have this whole new network of people that you can tap into where you're discussing a common interest. And you never know professionally, the lines could get blurred sometimes. Sometimes you find people who can help you in work and vice versa.
Mm.
So even though you're doing this new thing in order to kind of step away from work a little bit, you find just by accident that it enhances it as well.
Yeah, it enhances that social aspect and helps you network both, in your private life and also professionally.
Yeah, those relationships are so important, and I think people do feed off of a new relationship where yes, there's a common interest, but there's some assistance in the game, and it may not happen immediately, but you can find that value down the road.
Right. Yeah, I love everything that you're saying. And one of the questions that I asked you that I want you to address sooner than later, because I know some people that are listening are like, Adam, you're crazy, right? I was already busy. And yes, even though I am confined to my house, I am even busier because I'm helping with my kids with virtual learning and this and that and the other thing. So how do we clear the noise for a little bit and are able to implement this new thing that's just for us? Like, how do we find the time when we have even less time now?
Yeah, no, I love the question. It's actually timely. Last night I was attending a virtual book release from a good friend of mine who's also a female coach, and her target audience is moms. Her name is Emily Golden, and the book is called The New Golden Rule, and it's really all about, people think the original golden rule is do unto others, right? As you would have done to you, but it's really about, owning your own mission and making sure that you're taking care of yourself. She said something very interesting last night. She said, when the pandemic first hit, there were all these virtuals, virtual feedings at the zoo and virtual museum tours and virtual cooking classes. And people felt guilty if they weren't doing all of that because they felt like they weren't living life. They weren't simulating the things that they were doing before COVID, which was, like us, going into New York City, going to Central Park, going to the zoo, museums, etc. So, the first piece of advice I would say is don't try to do everything. All right. There aren't enough hours in the day. You're absolutely right. If you're going to pick something, do something that's scalable to the rest of your life. So if you, for instance, want to do a podcast, doesn't have to be a half-hour podcast, doesn't have to be with guests, doesn't have to be with a lot of marketing and graphic design and music. It can just be you speaking for 5 minutes, as if you're making a journal entry verbally, right? A vlog or a blog, but an audio blog. Just do it for a short period of time. Put something out there, see how it makes you feel, do it again, do it a few times. And if you find that you're energized by it, you'll make time to do it. If it's important to you, you'll find the time.
That's right.
If you find like you're doing it just to do it, move on. Take a pause, rethink it, talk to other people in your network, see what's really driving them and energizing them. But yet to do too much is actually counterproductive, and it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to drain you even more, especially if you're doing it and you're not getting joy out of it. You're not developing that passion.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to hear because sometimes it takes a couple tries for things before we find our niche or the thing that we really want to invest our time in, right? I'm a teacher, so I hate the saying done is better than perfect. But I feel like it's applicable when you're trying to find something new, right? Like you said, just get on the podcast and get it done. Get it done, see how you feel about it. Don't try to meet these specific criteria that you create for yourself or these expectations. But just get it done and see how you feel about it. I think it's so important and actionable. You can go do that. Take a guitar class online if you choose, right? Or take your voice lesson online. I do that. It's wonderful.
Well, Jenny, I think that's an even better example. So podcast may not be the best example because the whole idea of a podcast or what you're doing on the She Interviews is it's meant to be seen and it's meant to be heard. So you're
Sure.
putting it out there. So somebody has never played the guitar, but they've always wanted to. That is a great first step, because ultimately you probably want to play for the enjoyment of other people, but you probably want to start out just learning a few chords, getting the basic fingerings and strumming down. Then your aptitude will increase and you can do it for you. And there's certainly community in music. I mean, I can tell you there are thousands of people just taking up the guitar or another musical instrument, and they're creating community around being a beginner. So
Right.
they're learning from one another. They're commiserating, but they're also celebrating each other's victories when they move on from Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to Old MacDonald and eventually Back in Black, which you'll probably get by the third listen.
So
Yeah.
these are all we call them silent victories, right? Did you guys read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective
Highly
People,
effective.
like
Yep,
from
yep,
a long
Covey.
time ago,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So there's the different levels, and you have to start with your silent victories first. And like I feel like COVID is the perfect time for people to be getting those silent victories on the things that they always wanted to do and were never able to do. Like for me, during this time period, I just felt like the world is shifting and it's like a now or never feeling. Like I have an excuse to get off the hamster wheel right now. Like I could either complain that like my life is blowing up and things are changing, or I can be like, I have an excuse to get off this hamster wheel and not have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I said I was going to do. And now I have this excuse to not do those things, clear some time for myself, and launch the She Interviews, which is something that we've been talking about for 2 years, right? And before we were launching it, Jenny was having these silent victories. Like we knew what we wanted to do, but we had no idea how to do it. I'm like, all I know how to do is interview people. How, like, now what, right?
Mhm.
It took me 2 weeks to figure out how to format a video. It took me a week of researching what kind of software I was going to use. In fact, this is a funny story. Remember, Jenny, I was like, how the hell am I going to do this? I'm doing all this, I'm not a techie person. I'm doing all this research, and I'm like, all right, I watched like 1,000 YouTube videos. I figured out the program that we're going to use to make these videos. I buy the program, and then it's like, cannot down, like I paid for it, and then it's like, cannot download. And I'm like, so I like contact support, and they're like, oh, this program's not compatible with a Google Chromebook. And I'm like, back to the drawing board, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is like all behind the scenes. It's like, not something that's happening outward, like you were saying, but like, so I found plan B. It was a third the price, and it was just as easy to use. You know what I mean? And like when that happened, it felt so good because it was like one step closer to this like passion project that we've been wanting to do, but couldn't give ourselves permission to do in, ordinary life before COVID.
Yeah, and now you're a subject matter expert on it, and people are going to be calling you.
Well, like you were talking about honing skill sets that we never had before, which is hilarious. I mean, just we're basically in charge of the Instagram feed, and I'm a word person. I'm like, I don't do the pictures, Jess. I don't understand visuals. Like I write all the words. I teach English. I do content and copywriting. Like I'm editing. Like that's my bag.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd call me 14 times a day about our picture feed on the Instagram.
I'm like, don't put those 2 pictures together. It doesn't look right.
Put those 2 pictures together. I'm like, I don't understand.
Well, so now you're just working with a snob.
I gave up. I gave up finally. She's like, I told you so. It doesn't matter. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Screw it. Let's move on.
It's a good balance.
I learned so much of how to look at images and what those mean and how they can be translatable and used to build community, because that's what we're talking about, to establish our skills. I have a whole new skill set I didn't have before because I didn't think I was capable of it. And now we have been able to establish community that way, which is amazing to watch grow.
Yeah. We've connected so many women offline.
Yeah.
That needed resources and whatever, just because of the relationships that we've fostered so far.
All right. So Adam, people who are listening at home, like moms and dads who are like, yes, I get this. I love what you're saying. I want to find my thing. I want to hone my skills. I want to maybe translate that into something entrepreneurial because I love this flexibility, but I don't know where to start. Like I've never had any time. I've worked 90-hour weeks for the last 6 years and I barely know my kids. Like, what's the first step?
I think it all goes back to relationships, right? I used to play racquetball terribly, but I found that when I played better players, I would get better. So I had to go find those better players. Being in the industry that I'm in, human resources, with a focus on learning and development, but also talent acquisition, I am a LinkedIn consumer to the utmost degree. And first, what amazes me about LinkedIn is that you never know who you're connected to through all those different degrees of separation. And I think the whole maybe unwritten premise about LinkedIn is that we're all here to help each other. We have to remember when '03, when LinkedIn started, it wasn't meant for recruiting, although that's probably the biggest source of revenue now. It was meant to bring people perhaps who had money and ideas together to create entrepreneurial glory.
Yeah.
And I think it still has that usage. So I think it's really a matter of writing down or looking through LinkedIn or any other quote unquote Rolodex. I know that's a term that dates me, but source of people information. Who do you know? Who do you know that knows somebody, et cetera, and so on. And so, like the old shampoo commercial, they'll tell two people and they'll tell. So who are you connected to either directly or indirectly that has that expertise that can coach and mentor you over the long term or on a micro aspect of what you're trying to do? Stay in those communities, right? Be involved in those communities, be a contributor in those communities. And I think what I'm also finding interesting is that all of this newness, right? All of these new skills are breeding education. So now there are like certificates and certifications which validate your newfound expertise and make you a credible player in the game. So go find those people and continue to get good at what you're doing. And that'll help you enhance whatever entrepreneurial pursuit you have.
Right. It's going to make you, you're saying like it's going to make you a more rounded person. So not only is going to be an outlet for yourself, make you feel better, but putting that on your resume is also going to make you more interesting and stand out.
Yeah. I look at a lot of resumes every day, fortunately or unfortunately. And, people always ask me, should I put these hobbies? Should I put like stand-up comedy on? Or should I put on that I play in a bar band? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Because for people like me in the recruiting business, that's probably the first thing I'm going to ask you about. You're a soccer coach. Tell me about your adventures in soccer. What's your favorite Premier League soccer team if you're that interested in the sport? So these are the ways that, we as recruiters build rapport with candidates. And I also think it shows more of a dimensionality to candidates, to you as a candidate. Think about your competition, right? If you're applying for a job, regardless of the way you're doing it, whether it's through Indeed or through a third-party recruiter or through a friend, you got to imagine you're probably up against at least a dozen other candidates. So what are you doing to separate yourself? And if that's, I play the guitar on weekends in a bar and I'm a Beatles fan, never know. That could be the tipping point in you getting a job versus somebody else with the same skill set, but maybe is not as interesting.
Right.
Fascinating.
I actually sang in my first interview after college because
Well, let's hear how that went.
I sang.
What did you sing? Do you remember?
Yes, "Fly Me to the Moon" by Frank Sinatra.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
I was asked to get up and talk about something that I was passionate about. And I was literally like, my knees were like, because it was like a panel of people. So, to relax, I like to sing. So I was like, I'm passionate about singing, specifically Frank Sinatra songs.
And this was after you got the job, right?
Well, I'm pretty sure this is what got me the job. Because otherwise I was like a mess.
It's hilarious.
Well, I haven't asked anybody to sing in an interview, but I think I might now just to see what I get.
I think I could totally put bar band on my resume, and I've left it out this entire time. Thank you.
See?
That makes total sense.
Make room for it. Absolutely.
I'm going to need a second page with all the things that I've
I
tried.
know, me too.
Yeah, that's going to be the art form. Maybe the next time I'm on, we'll do a whole workshop on resumes and how to keep it to 2 pages while still looking interesting.
Yes, I love that. And honestly, Adam, I would love to have another conversation with you about things that women could maybe look out for when they're applying for a position, or maybe have been in a position for a while and they feel like they're not sure if they're being treated unfairly. I think in your expertise, you'd be able to speak to that. And I think that's something that we need to address, because it's something of late that I've been getting a lot of questions about and hearing a lot of stories of, especially in this COVID atmosphere where things at work are changing so rapidly. So
huge topic of conversation. Happy to speak about it. It's been relevant for a few years now with the narrowing of the gender equity pay gap in the state of New Jersey, where that became law. And we're making strides, if we're there 100% yet, but we're making strides. But I think this is a relevant topic even more so with all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion training and discussions that are happening in the workplace.
Yeah. So we're going to make that part 2 with Adam Shandler. Okay. So we'll talk offline and get that scheduled, because I feel like we're about to get into a really good conversation, and I want to pump the brakes because we already kind of went over time. But man, this has been such a great conversation. I love having you on the show, and we're definitely gonna, as long as you're willing to donate your time to us, we'd love to have you back really soon.
Yeah,
hey, I'm home, so I'm happy to be on. This is a lot of fun. Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
It was really fun to have you. I'm looking forward to the next time. I love that there's going to be one.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight at the She Interviews. We will see you next time. Take care.